And we're back. Today we are talking all about SHADOWDARK RPG and why I think it's the perfect blend between the old and new school styles of TTRPG play. I did not write a script today. I want to just kind of go off the cuff. I like to connect to you guys. So let's talk about the things that I like, some of the issues that I don't like, and let's end on a positive note because there's some really cool things that this system brings that even old school games don't. So first, I would like to talk about, well, it's in the name, light, and how dark vision in modern games, it really diminishes the quality of excitement and play that you get while you're adventuring. And here's why. If every person in the party has dark vision, then you eliminate a challenge that the dungeon master can present to the players. And when they are dependent upon an object that they have to track encumbrance for, and it can be attacked, because there's an entire section in here about attacking the light, and the light can go out, and your players are forced to react quickly, they have to improvise, and if they can't adjust to the new situation, every check that they make is at disadvantage. They're not going to survive long in that scenario because their enemies, the monsters, do see in the dark. So I really like that. I think that's a clever way to challenge your players, and if you hand wave light, you are taking a set of scissors and just chopping out a part of the game. The next thing I like is encumbrance, and that ties in a little bit to the light in that they have to keep track of how many torches can they bring, but also how many rations. What weapons are you bringing? The type of armor you have limits the amount that you can carry. And when you have to make a meaningful choice, and we're going to say that phrase a lot, meaningful choice in this video, you engage the players in the world. If you hand wave encumbrance and you say, oh, you can carry as much as you want, then again, you're taking the scissors and you're just chopping out chunks of the game where the players could be invested. Do we bring an extra torch? Or do we bring an extra set of rations? Can I bring my plate mail today? Do I have enough encumbrance spots for it? Whenever you're down in the dungeon and you find more treasure, but you don't have enough spots to carry it, what are you leaving behind? All of these decisions engage your players, and I think it's so fun. It's also great for a dungeon master because when you play RPGs on easy mode and you're hand waving a lot of these things, as a dungeon master, I know for me personally, I get a little bored with the system. But whenever I see the players sweating and like looking at each other and negotiating, be like, no, we need the 10-foot pole. Let's ditch, the lantern because we have 4 torches left. I think that kind of gameplay where they're looking at each other, it takes the load off of you as the DM to present challenges because they're going to negotiate amongst themselves. I think the classes are great in this system. There are 4 in the core book, and I think the Arcane Library, the designer of this system, she did a great job in making each class feel special. In other systems, the classes, they kind of feel a little samey. Like, you can't tell the difference between a cleric and a fighter at level 1. There's just no difference in old school games. Oh, no, you can turn undead. But for the most part, like, you're just a frontliner that can swing a weapon. But in this system, the fighter doesn't fall behind. They get weapon mastery. It's one of their features, and it automatically puts them a cut above the rest when it comes to damage dealing. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't add your strength or your dexterity modifier to the damage rolls. So when you get a class feature that automatically gives you more damage, that's pushing you to combat. That is showcasing how the fighter is going to be doing more damage. And they have access to weapons that other classes don't. And while that might seem trivial in other RPGs because you get to buff the damage with the strength and the dexterity, you don't do that here, so the weapon choice really matters a lot. But we're going to get to weapons in just a little bit whenever we get to other classes, because the cleric, called the priest in this book, is very neat. I want to play one myself. There's a lot of different ways you could build it. This is true for each of the classes, but in particular, you can play a paladin at level 1 with spellcasting abilities if you roll really well on your strength. There's combat spells like Holy Weapon, where you can buff up your sword. Priests can use swords, so you're not limited to bludgeoning weapons in this system. You can buff up your armor with, what is the name of that spell? Oh, Shield of Faith. So you can just right out the gate just go tank mode or damage mode as a level 1 paladin. Whereas in other old school games, you're limited to like, I think it's like level 9 before you start getting spellcasting. Now that might not be right, but it's very late in the game. So I love that. I want to play the priest class. You could also build the standard like support healer if you just focus on the wisdom. I think that's cool. The thief class is adjusted really well because in old school games, the thief, they struggle to be able to pull off their skills. The percentage chance on a D100 of like unlocking a door or removing a trap is so low, it's dangerous for you to even try to remove a treasure trap. But with ShadowDark, you get advantage. So that's a solid buff right away, where you're gonna get 2 numbers and one of them is gonna be statistically speaking, a bit higher than the other. So you're more likely to do the things that thieves should do. The Backstab ability is functional in ShadowDark, where all you have to do is not be seen by your enemy when you make the attack. Whereas in old school, you had to not be seen, so you have to somehow snuff out the light. But if you snuff out the light, then you can't see, and in old school games you can't even attack. You have to be behind the opponent. There's all these things that are going to limit you from being able to successfully do a thief's backstab ability. But here, there are some race features that just give you invisibility for a couple rounds. So if you're a halfling thief, you could just be invisible, you know? Or you could just succeed on a stealth check if you have somewhere to hide. These are ways to make the thief viable, but he's never going to overshadow with that extra thief backstab damage than a fighter will, because he's limited by his weapon proficiencies. A fighter can use a bow, a longbow, a d8 of damage, and just pepper the bad guy from the back if they have a dexterity build. The thief, on the other hand, is limited to the short bow, which is only a d4. So if they want to do more damage, they have to get in a little closer. So there's another choice, right? They can do a d6 with the short sword. But the trade-off is you're much closer, you don't have as many hit points, you're gonna fall. You could stay in the back with a crossbow and try to shoot with a d6 of damage, but then you're limited to movement. So if the bad guys are coming, you can't shoot and move in the same turn. There's always a decision that the player has to make, and I think that is awesome. The Spellcasting Wizard is great. I think it was heavily inspired by Dungeon Crawl Classics by Goodman Games, because you have to make a spell check every time you want to cast a spell. And I think that's great. You want your magic system, you want it to be unpredictable. And maybe you don't at home, but doesn't it sometimes feel a little rote whenever you say, I cast Fireball, and the effects of Fireball are exactly the same. You get this huge of a radius, and it can go this far away. With this spell system, you might want to be able to cast Fireball, but you can't because you didn't roll high enough on your check. And I think that's really cool. If you roll a natural 1, you have like this massive, terrible spell effect that happens, and it makes people fear the wizard because of the unpredictability. But the power that comes at higher levels really gives you that trade-off where you feel a meaningful choice has been made when you choose the wizard class. I touched a little bit on the races, and I want to get a little deeper in that. I love to play human-centric games. This goes all the way back to Appendix N, human-focused worlds. Conan didn't have a bunch of elves running around. There were not dwarves around every corner and halflings. And I think that Shadowdark does a great job of making you want to choose human because you get 2 roles on the talent table, and the talent table differentiates you and makes you more powerful with every role. But the demi-human races each have something very special that makes them worth choosing. The goblin, you get to never be surprised. That's awesome. The dwarf, you get advantage on your hit point rolls, and I think that will come into play a lot. Getting like 1 or 2 extra hit points every time could mean the difference between whether or not you're re-rolling a character. The fact that the ancestries, is what she calls them in this book, are so unique and so special are exciting, and there is a table in here where you can roll a random character, and I want to just do that a few times to see what I can come up with and how it turns out with the talent table, and how each class with a different race will play completely differently. So yeah, kudos to Kelsey Dion with the race creation. Next up, alignment. Alignment matters in this system. You guys know me. 3 hearts, 3 lions. Classic law versus chaos. It is intrinsic to role-playing in these games. But outside of RP, the mechanics of the game are supported with law versus chaos. There are magic items in this book. I keep looking down at it. There are magic items in this book that are designed specifically for certain classes. And that's something that 5e really dropped the ball on. There's only a couple legendary items, like maybe 1 or 2, that are tied to alignment. In this book, there were several, as I read through them, that were specific to one alignment. And that is great, because what are the odds that you're going to have 2, chaotic clerics both chasing after the same armor set? In fact, what's going to happen is you're going to have that one chaotic cleric maybe in your entire campaign, even if you play an open table, and that guy is going to be trying to recruit other people to help him track down these armor sets, because if he can get the magic lance, the magic sword, and the magic armor, he's going to be the most Voltron super soldier there is. And so I think that is exciting. It's player engagement, it's player-driven motivation to find these magic items that would serve their god. So again, very cool. We touched a little bit on the weapons. I think that whenever you limit and you have to force the player to make a choice with weapons, it's just one aspect of the game where meaningful choice comes back into play. You're engaging the player. You're not taking the scissors, because chopping out entire swaths of the game because you want to hand wave it doesn't serve your game, it doesn't serve the table. And so while OD&D, every weapon does the same damage, you do see some distinctions whenever you start looking at weapon versus armor class. But it's the only thing that does the damage is your weapon, and maybe if you have some talents. So the weapon that you choose is going to inform the style of play your character engages with. I love it. I think it's awesome. There's also a gauntlet for level 0 characters in this book that they basically describe how each player gets several level 0s. They go into a meat grinder dungeon. Whoever comes out alive gets to level up. This is so fun. My guys, my table, they eat this stuff up. We've done funnels, gauntlets in DCC, and they turn on each other. Since they have so many characters to choose from, they'll go PvP mode and just laugh hysterically the whole time as like all these different chaotic ways that you can kill a PC. And you're not too attached with the level 0, so you can really just kind of push things to the limit. But if your level 0 lives, you will see a PC like cling to that level 0 because they're now level 1. They already have a backstory. They have so much attachment to this little guy. They're like, oh man, my chef, he was a baker before, but now he's a wizard. And so I love the idea of writing your own backstory through a funnel. If you survive the funnel, like I survived the Caves of Carnage, that's my backstory. I was a chef and now I'm this. I think that's great. Again, the funnel, the gauntlet is another great tool. And if you're going to be running an actual campaign, not just one-shots, you should do the gauntlet. It's great. In Shadowdark, death is a possibility. Now, when you're looking at 5e, beyond level 1, death really, the chances of it happening are much lower. There are some random things that could happen, like a disintegration, but for the most part, like table, session after session, 5e and 5.5, they have built a nerf system where there's really not much chance for death. With Shadowdark, if you hit 0, you roll a d4, you add your con modifier, and that's how many attempts you get to save yourself with a natural 20. Your friends can try to help you as well. They can use healing magic, or they can do a first aid check on you. But if they fail and you run out of time, your character will die. And I can see when you roll 3d6 down the line, I could see like a constitution modifier of +0 being very normal, maybe even a -1. Rolling the d4, you've got 1 turn for people to get to you, but you fell off the bridge and now no one can reach you. If you don't roll that d20, you're done. You know, I love that. I think it's exciting. For a dungeon master, I want my players to fear for their characters, because if they do, they are invested. They are in the world. They're at the table, but they're in the game. They're thinking about how they can manipulate the world and make good choices, and they're going to take things seriously. If there's no threat of death, if they think that everything around them should fear them, then they're going to run roughshod over your campaign world and disrespect every NPC, and you start to feel things unwind a little bit. But if death is ever present, the players are worried, and they're going to look out for each other, and they're going to try to take things a little bit more seriously. So yes, death should matter, and that's why I love Shadowdark. If you are a returning viewer of the channel, you know how much we value downtime, and when the players are not in the dungeon, what is it that they are getting up to when they are back in town, when they're in a relatively safe environment? Now, the first thing that led me to Shadowdark was my buddies over at Black Lodge Games have created a downtime system for Shadowdark called the Shackled Oyster. They're currently live on Kickstarter. You should check them out. But I was interested in using this, and I was like, okay, I want to try this out. But whenever I was looking at, the downtime in this book, I was like, I don't think it's really going to port very well to OSE, so let's just invest into this campaign. Let's see what it's all about. And so the quick start rules really sold me on Shadowdark, and now that I'm looking at it, I think it's great the way that everybody chips in. You want to get that high modifier, you could get a magic item, you could make a new friend. The game doesn't stop when you leave the dungeon. There are things to engage within the world, and you want your players invested in those things. I love that there's a downtime mechanic built into the system that I don't have to buy a supplement to add, because as you guys know, on my OSE series, I bought an extra supplement on downtimes and domains just so I could, because I valued it so much, I wanted to use it. So it's nice to have it just baked right into the core system. Now, there are some things that I'm not too fond of with the system, and ideally it's the ranges. I don't like near, distant. My players are very tactical, and they want to know, how near are you? How far is distant? Because they'll try to ask a lot of questions. It doesn't speed things up for our table. It's more like, am I close? Am I near enough to near all the way around the front line and get to the wizard in the back? And for us, that doesn't feel very satisfying, and so we're not going to change it right away. I think that we might change it in the future to more of a 5-foot square grid-based system. But for now, we're going to keep testing. But one thing we have to change is the healing. It's far too powerful in Shadowdark. Taking a rest with your rations it gives you full hit points, and that's too much. It encourages sloppy gameplay because the players will be like, well, we can just rest afterwards. And like we'll just fight these goblins, and then when we're done we'll just heal up to full. And that's not the kind of game that I like to run. We're probably going to switch it to the classic 1 hit point per day. There is a grinder mode option which we haven't tested yet. We might go for that, but we're not too fond of the spells. We want the spells to go to full, and we really like 1 hit point per day because we use 1-to-1 time in our campaign. And so if they're healing that predictable 1 hit point per day, they're going to be very weary. Actually, combat really shouldn't even be an option for them. They're going to do everything they can to avoid it. And so those are the two things that I'm not too fond of. But for the most part, I think that this is a very clever system. I'm really happy with having purchased it, having read it twice through. It's very easy read. The formatting is incredible. I'm not going to tell you that you should buy it, but if you're interested in a blend of the old and the new coming together in a very efficient and cogent way, I suggest you buy SHADOWDARK. And if you do, let me know in the comments what you think about it. Thank you for watching so far. I know that I've been a little rambly because I don't have a script, but if you liked it, hit like and subscribe. And maybe I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.